everyone. I wanted to film my top 10 books of 2025. I love watching these videos, so I thought I would try and film one myself. I don't often film inside, but it is very rainy, cold, just cozy weather today. So we're inside, I'm all cozied up, and I'm excited to talk about my top 10 books. These are in no particular order. I don't always love doing a really strict ranking system because, I don't know, I might really enjoy a book that I feel like the writing is not necessarily as, high quality or something else that I might read, but that doesn't make its experience for me personally less than a 5-star or something that I would call in my top 10. So these are in no particular order, not really giving them any sort of star ranking because I don't know, it just isn't how my brain works with books currently. So these are in no particular order. There are a couple series that I've kind of lumped all into one because I enjoyed multiple of the books and they would make it into my top 10, but I don't want to take up that many spots with a series and things like that. And I don't have physical copies of a lot of these books because they were either borrowed or they were an audiobook, or I borrow a lot of books from the library, and so obviously those are returned. I just tend not to buy books unless it's, I don't know, it has to be like a particular situation or I feel like I want to reread it, and I don't often reread books, but that's something I want to try going into 2026. Yeah, I just want to try some rereads and know that it's still really valuable, even if I've read it before. It doesn't always have to be that I'm reading something new and adding to my life list of books or whatever, because that's not always what it's about. So I might start by sharing some of my overall reading stats for 2025. So I'm just pulling those up and I'll do a little bit of a screen share and just kind of go through so that you can see some of what I'm looking at. The app that I use to track my reading is Storygraph. I know everyone is on Goodreads and it seems like a great, well-developed platform and the social aspects seem awesome, but it is owned by Amazon. I try and avoid where possible, and Storygraph is Black woman owned, and I just feel a little bit better about using that service. So that's why I use Storygraph, and I like it. It collects some really interesting data, and I really like being able to see and track my reading. So in 2025, the goal that I had set on Storygraph for the number of books that I wanted to read was 30 books. I ended up reading 36, so I surpassed my goal, which is really, really exciting. And going into 2026, I want to be a little extra ambitious, and I set my goal for 50 books this year. So I'm hoping that with my increased commute time and things like that, I can really rack up those audiobooks and continue to add those to my list. I've been really loving audiobooks. I love that medium a lot more than I thought I was going to. And so I'm excited. 50 books is my goal. But just to talk about some of my stats for 2025. So Storygraph will show you kind of your average time to finish the book. So my average time was about 17 days. It'll show you some of your moods. Kind of unsurprisingly, 25 of my books were reflective. I think 18 were emotional. So these kind of things aren't very surprising to me. They'll have some data about the pace, page number, fiction versus nonfiction. It looks like I read about 64% fiction and 36% nonfiction. So honestly, obviously favoring fiction, but it does feel like kind of a pretty good split for me. My top genre was literary, read a lot of contemporary this year, which has been new for me. My undergrad and grad degrees are both in English Lit, so for many years, all of my reading was really taken up by strictly classics, and of course I still love reading classics and reading that literary fiction that really gets you focused in, but I've been enjoying getting into some contemporary literature and reading for fun and what that actually looks like for me. A little bit sniffly with this weather. We have been having weather that has just been up and down the last few weeks. And then it goes into format. On Storygraph, sometimes things will be coded in there, like someone had uploaded it as an audiobook and I read a physical copy and vice versa, and I don't really mess with that, so this is probably not accurate. My most read author was Elena Ferrante, which she will come up later. Then Sarah J. Maas, Diana Wynne Jones, and Mary Oliver. I've got this graph that'll kind of show your books and pages graphed onto each other, and then some star ratings, but like I said, you can see that most of these I don't rate because I don't know, I have a hard time in my brain being able to differentiate, like, what is a 3 versus a 3.5 stars for me? I don't know. So those are some of my stats, and now let's talk about my top 10 books. So now let's talk about my top 10 of 2025. So let's start with how I kind of started my year. So I started my year being a little over halfway through the Throne of Glass series, Sarah J. Maas. So my wonderful sister over the last few years has gotten very into fantasy, romantasy, that whole kind of really popular subgenre. And so she got me into reading A Court of Thorns and Roses, which I read in 2024. And then my sister's absolute favorite series is Throne of Glass. And she spoke so highly of it, and I enjoyed A Court of Thorns and Roses, and so I decided to take on Throne of Glass, which is 8 books. And I got through most of it in 2024, but to start off this year, I read the last 3 books of the series, which I believe is Queen of Shadows, Tower of Dawn, and Kingdom of Ash, which is the last book in the series. And I did not expect how much I would love this series so much, and just how much it has stuck with me, the characters, the relationships they build, the main character, just how much I loved and felt so attached to those characters and was sad to be leaving them. And Kingdom of Ash, I cried so many times. Manon, definitely my favorite character by the end. Just, there were so many moments in Kingdom of Ash that just really got me. And we're in Kingdom of Ash, the final book, we're really in full-blown war. Like, things on all fronts are happening. So many people are involved. So many different stories are coming together. And I thought it was so well done. I thought it was a beautiful end to the series. I absolutely loved it. And I'm so glad I read it. So now I've read A Court of Thorns and Roses, and I've read Throne of Glass. I haven't read Crescent City. I will. I think it being set in a more contemporary setting is really keeping me from wanting to read Crescent City, but I will. I definitely will. But yeah, that's a goal coming up, but absolutely love that series. Think about it all the time. I wish they would make some sort of television program or series or whatever, but it'll probably be A Court of Thorns and Roses that gets a series, which I will also absolutely watch, but I wish Throne of Glass would, because it was amazing. So I wanted to start off there. And then the next book that I have listed is Writers and Lovers by Lily King. I read this in the latter half of the year. I talked about it in my last reading update. We follow Casey, who is in her 30s, wants to be a writer, has recently experienced the death of her mother, living in the Boston-Cambridge area, and just navigating all of these life changes that are happening, trying to get a book published, navigating all of these life changes, the relationships she's forming, all of that. I loved the setting. I loved Lily King's writing. This is my first thing I've read by Lily King, but I don't think it will be the last. And yeah, I absolutely loved it. I listened to this one on audio and I enjoyed that as well. So would definitely recommend Writers and Lovers. The next book is Howl's Moving Castle. So I had seen the Studio Ghibli film, loved it, and decided that I wanted to read the book. So this is, I think it's technically YA, but we're following Sophie, who works in a hat shop, has sisters, and they're kind of navigating what the next phase of their life is going to look like. She is cursed by an evil witch and decides to seek out refuge in Howl's Moving Castle, who she's heard likes to eat pretty girls. But because of the spell that she's under, she's sure that she'll be fine. And so we get to see her relationship build with other characters in the story, with Howl. And I just loved the setting. It's so fun. The dialogue is just so witty and quick, and I just absolutely loved it. Definitely would recommend. I listened to that one on audio too, and I think that was a really fun experience, hearing characters like Calcifer, and yeah, absolutely love it. Would definitely recommend. The next book on my list is Piranesi. I had heard this book recommended from a number of the people that I like to watch on BookTube and things like that. So on audiobook on a road trip with my fiance. This book is just so unique. And I think the world building and the setting, we're following Piranesi, who lives in this sort of maze labyrinth type of situation with all of these beautifully done statues, and it feels very ancient, potentially Greek, and it is also next to the ocean, and so there are things like floods that Piranesi has to track. And as far as Piranesi knows, he is the only person living in this area other than one other person who he sees occasionally called the Other. And the Other has him on this search for some sort of knowledge, some sort of great and secret knowledge. And Piranesi is very methodical, and he writes these daily diary entries about the floods that he's tracking and which statues he's seen, and he knows sort of this elaborate layout of the labyrinth. And so the writing is just so incredible, and the sort of whimsy and awe that Piranesi has about this world in which he lives. And yeah, the writing was beautiful. It's something that really stuck with me, something I thought about. And yeah, would definitely recommend. I think next time, if I read it again, I would love to do a physical read rather than an audiobook, because I think that will be just another level of experience. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. The next one on my list is Frankenstein, Mary Shelley. This was actually my first time reading Frankenstein, which is so funny, having a literal master's degree in literature and having never read Frankenstein. But I loved it. The writing is so good at building suspense and tension. And I would have to say, like, my absolute kind of favorite part of the book is really where the monster is watching the family. Loved the monsters kind of learning about humanity and the earth and animals, and that process of discovery, I think, was so beautiful to me. I absolutely loved it. I hated Dr. Frankenstein the whole time. I was like, oh, you're the worst. And I recently watched the newer Frankenstein film that came out with Jacob Elordi as the monster, and I feel like they did a good job of displaying just how absolutely unhinged and awful Dr. Frankenstein is. Yeah, obviously they made some changes there to certain things that I was like, I don't know, unsure how I felt about, but loved the book, was so happy that I read it, would definitely recommend. The next one is nonfiction. You didn't hear this from me. This is an essay collection from Kelsey McKinney, the host of previous host of Normal Gossip. Probably my favorite podcast, at least one of my favorites. And this is really a collection of essays talking about the history of gossip, not only socioculturally, but also in Kelsey's own life, and the ways that things like religion and guilt and shame and things like that really play into how we think about gossip. And I think a lot of people are on the train now of gossip is not an inherently negative thing. It's a way of spreading information. It's a way of connecting with other people and building community and things like that. But I loved the writing. It was quick. It was easy to get through. I feel like I learned a lot, and it was very charming. I loved hearing about Kelsey's love of Britney Spears as a child, and all of the ways that gossip played into that sort of celebrity and the idea of the celebrity. So I absolutely loved it. I thought it was very fun to read, and I'm excited to see if Kelsey publishes anything else. So the next one is an entire series. This is the Neapolitan series, or My Brilliant Friend, by Elena Ferrante. So this is set in Naples, Italy, in the 60s? 50s, 60s? I'm forgetting now. It was a while ago since I read it. But this is really thinking about friendship and female friendship over time, and all of the messiness that often goes into this friendship. So this is a series of 4 books starting from the beginning of our friendship. So this is the friendship between Elena, or Lenu, and Leela, or Lena. And we're starting all the way back from, I think, when they're about 8 or 9 years old, and we follow them all the way up until they're old ladies navigating the later stages of their lives and friendship. And so, like I've said, I'm really interested in sisterhood and friendship and relationships between women, and I think that Elena Ferrante, which is not the author's name, it's a pseudonym, does a really great job of really laying bare some of the messiness of friendships over time, all of the jealousy and conflict and everything that comes up as their friendship progresses throughout their lives. So the writing was absolutely beautiful. It truly sticks with you. It makes you want to write, at least in my experience. I was like, man, this is just making me feel inspired. And I absolutely loved it. And my best friend is the one who recommended I read this, and I'm so glad that I did. The writing was just amazing. The setting, the world building. There are also some different political movements happening at the time. Our main protagonist that we're hearing from, Lenu, becomes a writer and becomes involved in some different communist circles in Italy during that time when everything was just really, things were wild. Things were all over the place. And so I think we get to hear a really interesting perspective of Lenu and her own life and how she grows and changes, and how education really impacts her, because we see how Lenu's education and Leela's education and the way that that impacts them, and not based on intelligence, but the way that education can help mobilize and change your life in the end. So beautiful writing, really just intense passages about friendship and the way it grows and changes over time, and the complicated feelings that we can have towards others. So absolutely would recommend that series. 4 books, starting with My Brilliant Friend. So I absolutely loved it. The next book on my list is Intermezzo by Sally Rooney. This is Sally Rooney's newest novel. This is the 4th novel, I believe. And this is the perspective of 2 brothers who have chosen very different ways of living their lives, and we get both of their perspectives, and we see the positives and negatives of both of them for sure. Sally Rooney is not leaving anything or holding anything back. Intermezzo is about these 2 brothers, Ivan and Peter, as they kind of navigate the aftermath of their father's death. They both live their lives in very different ways, have very different relationships with their parents, and we get both of their perspectives kind of going back and forth. And we have Peter, who on paper is extremely successful. He's a lawyer. He has relationships with women that are very tumultuous and complicated and multifaceted. And so we go between Peter's perspective and Ivan's perspective. Ivan is a chess player who plays chess very competitively, is in different tournaments, was once known as some sort of a prodigy, and so is very smart, and his brain works using chess as a vehicle for the way that he thinks about life and his relationships and things like that. And so we go back and forth between their perspectives, and we see, in very classic Sally Rooney fashion, lots of misunderstanding, miscommunication, lack of communication. And it's one of those things where sometimes you're like, if you guys would just talk to each other, you could really move forward and have these beautiful relationships with each other. But we see each of their perspectives as they're navigating relationships and jobs and life and the way they feel about themselves and their family and dealing with their father's death. And I loved it. And Sally did a really great job of switching between, as you move between the brothers' perspectives, it's written in a very different cadence and way of speaking. So it's cool moving between the Peter chapters and the Ivan chapters. And then we also get some perspectives from some of their other relationships as well. So it's cool how she moves between these points of view, and you can feel where the writing and communication style changes. And I really loved that. I thought it was really well done. So definitely enjoyed that and looking forward to her next one. So the next one on my list is Swan. This is a poetry collection by Mary Oliver. I don't know how I didn't get into Mary Oliver before, but this year I have really been getting into Mary Oliver's poetry, which I guess makes sense with how much I've been enjoying just outside, connecting with nature, birds, trees, the garden, all sorts of animals, all of that. And so Swan was a collection of poetry written by Mary Oliver, very focused on relationship with nature and outside. And she has several poems about her dog in this collection that I thought were absolutely beautiful. Yeah, I just loved it. I think I started with West Wind, a collection by Mary Oliver this year, and then Swan, which talked a lot about just the setting in which Mary lived and that sort of mindfulness, very meditative writing in thinking about our relationship to the earth and what we do for the earth and what the earth does for us. And I just love her poetry. I think this will be a lifelong love for me, but I had to include Mary Oliver on this list because I have been really getting into her work and hope to continue to get into it. So Swan was the collection that I picked as part of my top 10 this year, but Mary Oliver as a whole is there. And then the last one on my list is one that I've talked about in a reading update before, and that is The Brothers Karamazov. And so this is Dostoevsky. This is a book that sometimes throughout my reading experience, I was getting a little tired of it. I was feeling a bit of a slog. It was hard to keep moving, but I'm really proud of myself for reading the entire thing. I think the language is obviously amazing. Like the very intertangled, messy family dynamics and relationships going on, reputations within the town. So this is obviously a story of brothers. We have 3 brothers, and they all get into a variety of issues. We have Dmitri, who's the oldest and has had a lot of financial struggles with their father very publicly in the town, and also likes to get drunk, very drunk in public, and get himself into some very messy situations. And so he does not have the best reputation. And then we have the youngest brother, Alessi, who is supposed to be like the best of them all. He's entered a monastery. He tries to live a very kind of chaste life. He tries to be the intermediary between his brothers. And he really wants to be a problem solver, but also feels conflicted about his own feelings and opinions that come up, and he just wants everyone to be happy, and often that is not how it works. And so he's often being the intermediary and is supposed to be the best of them all. And then the third brother, who I believe is also named Ivan, which is funny after talking about intermezzo, but I'm just gonna double check myself. Okay, yes, so we have Dmitri, Alessi, and Ivan. Ivan is supposed to be the most sensible. He got the most education out of all of the brothers, but it turns out he's extremely messy and is also dealing with a lot of mental health issues, delusions, hallucinations, things that he's really trying to keep hidden from everyone else because he wants to keep up this perception he has. And this book, very obviously, you know, some modernist Russian literature. I believe Karamazov was paid by the word as well, and sometimes you can really tell that he was paid by the word, so there's some monologues that go on for a really long time. But I think a lot of the ideas they're exploring of religion and God and punishment and when can we actually be absolved, if ever, does punishment actually do that? And so really thinking about some of those ideas I found very fascinating. I loved when we really got into the courtroom, because at the center is that their father, who is known as being huge jerk, also a big drunkard. He basically abandoned all of them when they were young, and they were left to live with a servant and then find their own way in the world without any help from their father. And there are lots of disputes and fights when the brothers actually return to see their father start living with him and form these relationships in adulthood. And their father, at one point in the story, is murdered. And there's a lot that comes along with that. It brings all of the brothers together in a variety of ways. There's large courtroom drama, their relationships with different women in the town and surrounding towns. And so I would recommend it, but would say just know that you're getting yourself into something that you may have to keep yourself motivated to. Maybe you won't. Maybe you'll just be so inspired that you just keep rolling through and you don't need any motivation from me. But I certainly found it at times a little bit of a slog, and I had to really get myself into it. I think once the courtroom stuff started, once the murder happened, that's when I really was feeling excited to come back to it and to know what's going to happen. But the first half is very just men having long conversations about philosophy and having debates and things like that, which is interesting in its own way, but it went on for a very long time. So those are my top 10 books / slightly more than 10 because I included some series in there. But it was a great year of reading. I feel like I read a wide variety of things. I found some new authors that I absolutely love. I'm really excited to go into 2026 with my goal of 50 books and see if I can reach that. But overall, very proud of myself for this year of reading, and I would love to know what your top 10 books are, or if any of these books happen to be on your list. I know I'm kind of all over the place as far as what I was reading this year. But it was a great year of reading, and I'm excited next year. Hopefully I can say I hit my goal of 50 books. But we'll see. Wish me luck.